and I'd just like to start today following up from yesterday's Kitten example. And what I've done is I've just moved across to the Mac, as you can see, and I've taken yesterday's N+2 and all I've done is put it into a new directory and renamed it to KittenView_Mac. So I'd like today to take a look at doing better cells for iOS, so it shouldn't take too long to do. But to do that we are going to have to use Xcode and we are going to have to use Xamarin Studio. So I'm opening up that solution, which is just a copy of yesterday's. And what we should be able to see when this opens up. Okay, so when you open up a solution that's got Windows Phone and Windows Store in there, then it won't be able to open them in Xamarin Studio because it just doesn't know about Windows Phone and Windows Store. Now, I've already proposed doing a open source project to allow it to open these, but actually Xamarin have also said they're going to do it, so I'm going to back off. And soon, hopefully, this dialog saying I can't open a phone project or a store project will disappear, and then we might be able to do cross-platform refactoring again. So we get rid of this error, and then what we do is we notice that actually we kind of got grayed out things here, and we've kind of got these that won't load. And okay, there's a new version of iOS that I could download as well. But what we do is we need to sort out the fact that these things don't load. So we click on the solution, and we right click or we control click and we do options. And you'll find here in configurations that there's configuration mapping. And all we do is we say, right, well, what we'd like is for this configuration, which is debug, we'd just like to have the iPhone simulator running for touch. And actually, let's not worry about Droid in this configuration. Depending on what products you've got installed, you can do different things here. You can also, if you prefer, just work in iPhone simulator, and then you can say, look, I want my PCL project on my iPhone sim, or you can work in iPhone and do the same sort of thing. So you can see how those are all set. We click OK, and then what happens is it doesn't quite load up properly, but we should be able to do a refresh, and then you can see it's loaded. So this is exactly the same code as we had yesterday during the tutorial, during N+1, where n equals 2. So today we're just going to check it builds here. And off it goes and builds. So this is straight from source control, and it doesn't build. Okay, so one thing here is that it's saying the iOS executable name isn't correct. And to solve that, all we have to do is go to the properties, to options, and somewhere here, this is a known problem with these guys, somewhere in the iOS build. No, somewhere in general, is it, or output? I'll find it. Somewhere here. I think we need to change the main assembly name so it doesn't have a dot in it, and actually we do that for all platforms. So we do that, and now hopefully we should be able to debug this. Let's check. So it's building, launches the simulator, we'll launch Kitten View, hopefully. Did it? No, it's got some problems. So this is just normal sort of debugging. Let me find out what's going on here. Need to get rid of the Kitten View that's already there, because maybe that's interfering. And let's just try that again. Cannot execute. I may have to take a look at application output. Let me try a rebuild. Maybe that's the problem. Start debugging. Let me try switching to debug iPhone simulator. I might have to do this all again. If in doubt, quit the iOS simulator. If in doubt, quit Xamarin Studio. Restart Xamarin Studio. Load it up again. Okay, so I simply here, sorry about that. So the only problem there, and it's useful to get that captured on screen, was just some problem with startup. So there was no panic there. All I had to do was restart Xamarin Studio and restart the simulator, and then it ran. But that's the kind of thing that you just have to get a little bit used to, but also, you know, when that happens, report it to Xamarin, see if they can work out what's happened. But you know, sorry about that problem, but there you go. So on with the N+1. So you can see at the moment we've kind of got this display, and it's quite pretty. It's got kittens on it, but it's not very exciting to actually look at. And then we also just change the size of the simulator just so you can see it even better. The kitten's in higher resolution, and that's where we are. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to add a better cell just for iOS. So let's go to the touch directory. And let's add a cell. So we go to the touch, and what we do is we do add new file, and brand new we have some templates for cells. So what we do is we take a look at these templates and we say what we'd like is an iPhone table view cell, and what we'll call it is a kitten cell. Yeah, because it's going to be a cell for our kittens. And we hit new, and what Xamarin Studio will go off and do is it'll generate two files. So I should know how to zoom in, but I can't remember. I should remember, but I can't. So you'll have to just bear with me on this. We have a kitten cell, yeah, which is here. I can't remember the secret cuts for zooming in. And the kitten cell has two files with it. The first one is this generated file, which we won't touch. And the other one is our file, where we can do whatever we want, and that basically links us into something called a zib. So you can see there's a zib name, a UI nib, and all sorts of things. And the zib is this guy, and this is what our graphical representation is. And if we double click it, then we should see Xcode opening up, and hopefully it's going to open up in the same view, same window. So here it comes, hopefully. And what Xcode gives us, it gives us this designer. Now, if you've been watching Evolve, then you'll know that there is a new designer coming for built into Xamarin Studio, and hopefully built into Visual Studio as well. But for now, this is the one we have to use. And what you can see is we've got a kitten cell, and we've got this kind of area here. I'm not going to give you a huge in-depth detailing on how to use this. I think most of you will get the hang of it. Let me just get the screen recording window out the way. Most of you get the hang of it very quickly. So you can see that what it is a kitten cell. We've got an identifier saying it's a kitten cell. We've got things to switch between here, which let us do things like change the colors and change the sizes and all sorts of things. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the size. So I'd like this cell to be 100 tall, so we'll do that. And then the other thing we'll do is we'll start putting some content in it. So down here, you can see at the bottom right, we have this little area where you can put new objects in. And the easy way to find things in here, you can scroll through and find your kind of child controls yourself, but the very easiest way is to start typing at the bottom. So I'd like to get an image, because the image is what I'm going to display my cat in. So I take the image and I drag it across, and I'm going to size this so that it gets to the top. And you can do this with dragging like this, but the easy way I find to size these things is to actually go up to this window up here, and you can actually just type things in. So I'm going to say that I want it aligned to the left, aligned to the top. I'd like it to be half the width, which let's say is 160, because we know that iOS is, you know, a 320 is a standard thing, and we'd like it to be 100. Now you can also, there's all these constraints here. You can also say how it sizes according to its parent. So you know you've got these properties here where you can change the way it does things. Yeah, and I'll come back, or other people will come back and tell you about how to use this more effectively in the future. So that's our image where we'll display our kittens. The next thing we want is we'd like to have the name of the kitten displayed. And so to do that, what I'll do is I'll find this label. You can see it there, or you could have typed label and it would have found it. And it even tells you a little bit about what a label is. Yeah. And so what I'll do is I'll drag the label across, and the label is going to go here. On the right hand side, and we'd like the label to kind of stretch, so I'll do that using this guy. And we'd like the label to be a bit bigger, so you find the properties here and you say, right, well, what I'd like it to be, you know, font size 20, say. You can choose whether or not it's got multiple lines if you like. I'm just going to leave it as one. I think you can choose things as well, like you can choose all sorts of things about font colors, and how it stretches, etc. There's lots of properties here. One thing to be a bit aware of is just make sure if you change something you tab to another control, because sometimes it does lose that. But it's a graphical design service, it's pretty good for what it does. We'll then add another label, and this is just going to be static text, so Chrome if you like, and that label is going to say price. Yeah, and obviously we haven't given it enough room there, so we'll give it a bit more room. And then what we need to do next to that is we'll actually put the price in. So here it goes. You can see there's nice controls for aligning things, and the price itself will stretch that, even though it's not really going to ever be that large. And what we'll do is we'll leave that saying label, and maybe we'll change this so that its foreground color is a nice blue. Yeah, so you can see how these things work together and you put them in there. Right, so I don't quite like that layout, so let's select a few things and move them down a bit, and you can design this however you'd want to. Having done that, what you then need to do is you need to hook up this image view, this name label, so I'll put it in there as kitten name just so you can see the design better as you look through, and I'll change this price label, and I'd like to hook those all up to something called outlets, which outlets are just like variables. They're just assigning properties, if you like, to these controls. Very funny. At Evolve, Miguel said, since the beginning of Dawn, man has been asking what is an outlet, and yeah, since I've been using this I have been asking that question. It's a very good question. The best thing is just to ignore what an outlet is and just think of them as properties. So to use that, what we do is we do a show assistant editor, and the assistant editor is just saying, for this Kitten Cell, which is what it is, here's the code, here's the header file if you like, that goes with this UI. And Xamarin Studio MonoDevelop has hooked these two things together for us very usefully. And what you can now do is you can take a look at this guy, and there are three places where you can pull up this outlet generation from. The first one is over here in this kind of view. You can actually right click and you'll find new referencing outlet, so you can drag that down if you want to. Yeah. The second place you could have done it is actually to right click or control click on this design surface, and you'll find the middle one here is a new referencing outlet, and again you could have dragged it down. And the third place is if you've got it selected there, then right over on the right hand side here you'll find the same options to drag them in. Regardless of where you drag in from, if you drag in like this and you drag in below the interface, you see where I'm dragging, then when you drop it asks you for a name. And so this is my main image, so that's what I'm going to give as a name. So that's my main image, and you hit return and it inputs this horrible looking statement about an outlet. You don't need to know any details about that, you just kind of need to follow through. So again, I'm going to do the same thing. So I've done it for the image, I'm going to do it for this name label. And for this one, I'll right click on the design service, I find new referencing outlet, I drag down to below that previous entry, and what I'm going to put in here is the name label. And that creates it. And then finally, I'm going to ignore this one because it's static text, but this one I'm going to click over here, I'm going to drag the new referencing outlet down, I'm going to release it, and when I've released it I can then put the price label as the name. That's it, that's our cell designed. And so what I'd now like to do is file, save, and what we should be able to do is if we close this, let's just quit Xcode to get out of the way. When we come back to Xamarin Studio, what we should hopefully notice is if we look in the designer, then we should notice, so you can see something's going on at the moment. Oh, something should have been going on at the moment. Let me just see. Okay, what we may need to do is go around the loop just to see what happens. So this is just a refresh problem within Xamarin Studio. It has got a lot better, but if we open this up again, then we can see it's all here, so it's all been saved. Let me just save it again, and this time when I come back to Xamarin Studio, hopefully Xamarin Studio will notice that that file has changed. Go on, Xamarin Studio. Normally this works like a dream at the moment, so I'm a bit disappointed it's not. Keep saving. And normally what happens when I drag these things in Xamarin Studio will notice this. So there you go. Okay, so it took a little while to sync those two up. Normally it's not as bad as that, so apologies for what happened. But you should see here that we've got 3 outlets generated in this designer file, and those 3 outlets have the same names as we had in the designer. We never need to look at that again. What we're going to do is come back to the Kitten cell, and we're going to start adding the data binding for it. So you can see here we've got this UI table view cell, and just as before when we had an activity in Android, we replaced it with an MVX activity. When we had a UI table view controller in the previous things, we replaced it with a MVX table view controller. What we're going to do here is we're going to take UI table view cell and we're going to replace it with MVX table view cell. And you'll see this little band-aid over here. It's telling you to do that you need to add a using, so it adds it for you. There's also a shortcut for that, which I think is option Apple space or something. We'll find that out in a moment. That's added the fact that we now kind of have binding for ourselves. And so what we actually want to do is add the binding. And we do that in the constructor. We do it in a slightly cunning way. What we do is we do this dot delay binding. And the reason we do delay binding is because we don't want to do it immediately, because when we first construct the object, all those outlets, all that kind of UI hasn't been loaded. So instead we choose to delay it until it is loaded. And what we do is we do delay bind, and then in that delay bind we pass it an action, which is what it'll actually do when we need to bind. So let's just resolve that. So let's see, is it? I wish I could remember my shortcuts at the moment. Oops, no, I'm definitely not getting my shortcuts right. So I'll just stick to mouse, and you can see you do using. So that's that. And now what we want to do is we actually want to set up the binding. So setting up the binding is just like it was when we set up our binding for our first view. So you can see here is our first view. And when we set up our binding, we kind of did a this create binding set. And we're going to do exactly the same thing. So let's go back to the cell. And what we're binding here is we are going to do this dot create binding set. And it's a binding set that's going to go from a kitten cell, and it's going to go to a kitten, which obviously won't be in our using namespace. Oops. It won't be in our using namespace at the moment, so let me just prepare the damage. So if we get rid of that, then what we'll need to do is kitten probably needs to be resolved, so we do that. So that creates a binding set, so let's store that. And then what we want to do is we want to actually use that set. So set.bind, and the things we want to bind are those properties. So let's use those properties. So we had a main image. No, image is one I'm going to do in a moment, slightly different. So what we want to do is we want to bind the name label to start with. And the main label we want to bind to something on the kitten, and what we want to bind it to is a kitten. Get rid of the autocomplete. And it's the kitten's name, was it? It's not as fresh in my memory today. So that set up the name label. The next thing we want to bind is we want to bind the price label, and we want to bind that to the kitten's, and it's the kitten's price, not too surprisingly. Yeah. And the final thing we want to do is the image, which I'm just going to leave as a comment. Let me come back to that. But then we want to do set apply. So this image, so as we said when we did Android, we don't have an easy way to access internet images, a straightforward one-liner in iOS. So what we have to do instead is we have to create a way. So what we do is we create a image view loader. Now let me just see if I can remember the syntax for this. So all of this is done live, this coding. And what we do is we create a new MVX image view loader. And what we need to do is pass in the way to access the image. So what we're going to do is it's a image view loader, and it's this dot main image. So you can see there's our image loader. It's not too exciting. It doesn't do too much that's complicated. And what we do is we bind our image view loader. So set bind image loader, and we bind that to the image URL. Yeah, and it just knows that the default property on the image loader is the thing that you need to set to load an image. So here we go, image URL. And that should now actually have a working cell. Yeah. So that's what we need to do. It's not, it's a two-stage process, whereas In Android, obviously, and in XAML, everything's done in XML, so it's kind of more one stage. But that is our cell, which is going to have a name, going to have a price, going to have an image loader. There is also some sizing to sort out. We'll do that in a moment. But that's our cell pretty much completed. So back in first view, what we now need to do is currently we've got this standard table view source, and that, as I say, used a standard table. We're going to replace that, and instead of having that standard, we're going to have a new source, and this new source is going to be a simple table view source. And again, we're going to pass in the table view, and what we then need to also pass in is the nib name and the cell identifier. So for both of these, we're going to actually just use KittenCell constants. So KittenCell dot, I think there was an identifier, was it a key? We're just going to pass KittenCell dot key in for both of those. And if you take a look at KittenCell dot key, hopefully here, you can see that there is just as straightforward here, a nib name KittenCell dot key. Yeah, so there is our key. It's just the same name as the file for the nib zib, and the same name for the class. So that's all there is. So back in first view, we should now be able to get rid of the old standard source. We do also have to tell the table view what the height of the row is. And I think this is done by row height equals, and I think we set it to 100. And that should now just tell it that every row is 100. If you need dynamically sizing cells, so you need each table row to have a different height, you can also do that using the source, but you normally have to inherit from the source for that. It's also more computationally expensive to do that, because obviously in order for the table to work out how tall it has to work out, you know, every cell, as it were. So that's our first view coded up, and I think actually that should pretty much work. So hopefully this wasn't too much work for you. All we've done is replace the standard table view source with a simple one, and we've drawn out this kitten cell including in Xcode. Let's see whether or not I've written the code correctly. If we build it, up it builds, and then if we actually run it, let's see whether or not we get a cell running. So here's the kitten view. Drum roll, will it work? Right, so you can see we've got 100 cells, and hopefully we'll get some images through. We're waiting for the internet. Did I manage to correctly hook in the images? It's looking like we haven't got images, so I'll have to take a look at that. Maybe I've done something wrong. But you can see we've got the first level. So let me just take a look at what's happening. And it looks like maybe what I need to do is let me correct what I've done. So we've got the image loader and it's not loading properly. Let's try setting the image loader explicitly. So let's try setting what the image loader's property is, although I thought this should probably work, but let's try. So this is the image loader, and the image loader, what we want to set on it is its image URL. Let's see if that helps. I'm pretty sure that should be its default anyway. Something's odd's happening, but let me just keep trying and see where it goes. It's because I've got two properties the same. Let me just correct that to image L, two variable names the same. I hope you don't mind me coding these live. I just would rather, you can see how, I genuinely develop. It's not like I've got a huge manual. Just explore and work. So it's not liking my image loader. It's giving me a problem here that the weak target is not. Okay, I know what the problem is. Right, so what it actually is, and apologies for this, I did try and hack this too quickly, is at the moment our image loader here is a local variable, and what the binding does by default is it uses weak references. And the reason it uses weak references is because you want to be able to tidy up things at the end. So what I'm going to do is, instead of having this as a local variable, I'm actually going to put it as a class level field. So I'm going to have an MvvmCross image view loader, and this is going to be image view loader. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to create that here, and it's underscore image view loader. And I hope that I haven't put you off or made it sound really too complicated by recording this and not going back. Oops, need an underscore. But that's all I had to do, was to make it into a field that is going to have the same lifetime. And in fact, I can even make it read-only just to help people out. It's going to have the same lifetime as its cell. And what we should now see is that when we run this up, we should now get our cells. Where are our kittens? Yes, so now you get your kittens. So apologies for that, and you know, we're using full cell reuse, so this is a fast scrolling thing. You can see that, you know, the images are updating as we scroll through. So I hope I didn't put people off by going through this as a live demo and by messing up my own code for image view loader. But that is a full cell that has kind of 3 bound fields in it. You could do 2-way binding here as well if you wanted to, but you know, most cells are kind of 1-way. It's a list, as it were. I hope that what I've taken you through is that we can take the same solution that we built in Visual Studio. We need to play with the configuration a little. When we've played with the configuration, the next thing we need to do is to, you know, actually start building on top of it. And what we can do is we can do a Kitten Cell, and the Kitten Cell we just create using the new Add New wizard. And once we've created it, we can open it in Xcode using the Zib editor. And we can drag fields in from here. We can set properties top right, and then finally, when we're happy with the design of our fields, we can drag things down to the view at the bottom, to this navigate to this view assistant editor. And when we've done that, after everything is done, what we should be able to do is save it, come back to to Xamarin Studio. There you go. That's how familiar it is to me. We'll get these fields generated when we've done that. And then after we've generated these fields, we can then do this little bit of code here to actually set the binding. Once we've done that, there's a little bit of a tweak to the table view to change it from a standard to a simple, and then off it runs. I guess you might have to watch this video a couple of times. Sorry about the mistakes. But that's it. I hope that gives you a good feeling for, you know, how you could design your own cells, your own tables if you wanted to. There are a few other demos available. One of them also shows, let me just see if it's on the it's on this version. So one of them that I've got somewhere, I think it's this one. This shows that as well as doing a simple, oops, maybe it's not that one, or maybe it's just not loaded in here. We've got several other demos in here anyway, and oh, maybe it's this one I'm looking for. And we should, when we no, nothing's working on my simulator at the moment. We've got a few other demos available anyway, and I'll come back and show those in a future thing. Some of them show things like that we do have polymorphic cells, and some of them say you can show, you know, a cat in one row and a dog in the next, and also that we get very simple animations for free, so you can actually zoom in and zoom out. You can, when you add a cell, it kind of slides in from the left if you want to, or slides down from the top. And I'll come back and I'll show those in a future N+1 as well. Right, I've talked for 28 minutes. Most of that has been mistakes, so this is probably the worst N+1 so far. But I hope that also in seeing the mistakes, you can see how you can still code through. And within 25 minutes, even with the mistakes, we get our new cells up and running. Okay. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll get back to the PC for the next one. Which I think will be on value converters. Thanks.